Ciao, Ni hao, Yasu, Bonjour, Guten Tag. My name is Lydia, and I'm your host of the Global Travel Junkie podcast, where we'll discover new luxury destinations and experiences together. So let's get started and meet today's guest. Hello, everyone. It's Lydia again with the Global Travel Junkie podcast and YouTube channel. And I'm so excited to welcome back Fernando Diez with Quasar Expeditions. Today, we're going to talk about Patagonia, which is another excursion that they customize for travelers. Hi, Fernando. How you doing?
Hi, Lydia. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
Good. Thanks for being here. I can't wait to dive in. And in the spirit of being impactful and quick, I'm going to ask you to do a little introduction for those who haven't met you yet from the other episode about the Galapagos excursion. Introduce yourself, and then let's just dive right in. I want you to tell everyone what Quasar Expeditions does in Patagonia for everybody.
Perfect. So again, my name is Fernando Diez, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Quasar Expeditions. This is a high-end adventure travel company that has been family-owned since 1986. It was actually started by my two parents, Eduardo and Dolores Diez, almost 40 years ago. And it continues to be family-run to this day. I am the Director of Marketing, and my two brothers also work at this company. So we've always made sure, that our adventures give people this feeling of being welcome, like into our home in our destination. And that's how we've always done it. Regardless of the fact that it's, a luxury company, it just feels like home when you travel with us. And so the Galapagos, as I said, started in '86, but I actually moved down to Chile. I'm originally from Ecuador. And for those of you who don't know, the Galapagos Islands belong to Ecuador. And I moved down to Chile in 2013. And basically, I've been here ever since. And, with this entrepreneurial spirit and this love for travel, I went to see Torres del Paine when I came to Chile, and I fell in love with the place. And I definitely said, it was actually my brother and I, we rented a sedan, probably the worst vehicle you can imagine to explore this terrain. We almost destroyed it in the process. And we said, there has to be a better way to be able to see these parks. And we saw so many properties and did so many excursions that we said, for people who are coming to a place like this, who don't know much about the places to stay, about the excursions that there is to do, and that you really need a good vehicle to get around these national parks, why don't we put something together that offers it all? And that's essentially how our Patagonia program started in 2013. And so as opposed to the Galapagos is obviously a cruising operation, and we own and operate the boats there, in Patagonia, we actually own a fleet of luxury SUV vehicles. And we take people around the national parks, exploring both the Chilean and the Argentine side of Patagonia in these vehicles where everything is, set for you. We taking care of the properties. You book these sort of all-inclusive packages that includes the hotels, it includes the meals, it includes the excursions. We have a guided and a non-guided version. On the guided version, you obviously have an expert Quasar guide accompany you throughout the trip. And then on the non-guided version, you actually are able to explore the parks on your own in these vehicles. And now that may seem, challenging maybe for some of the listeners, going to a remote place like Patagonia, where, you don't have the road signs that you have in most streets, like in the US, for example. Language, could be a barrier and things like that. However, we've planned this out so that it's very seamless and very easy to get around. So you have what we call the expedition manual, and it's an app that actually comes on your phone. It tells you every day what you have to do, where you have to go, what time you have to depart to the hotel to get to the excursion, what meals are included, the whole thing. And so people have given us the feedback of how extremely easy it was actually to be able to navigate around Patagonia on their own. And so this is very popular for photographers, for example, that they need complete flexibility to be out of the hotel, by 5 in the morning for those photos of sunrise, or be back, at 10 p.m. because they need to get those, warm light afternoon shots. So in essence, we offer it all, and this is really an adventure for all kinds of travelers of all ages and stages and physical ability levels.
Let's talk a little bit about the type of places that y'all work with, that people stay in, because you were telling me there's the option for like a yurt, which is a little bit more of a safari style, and then there's the 5-star, I'm sure just a resort type hotel or so.
Yep. So in essence, I think, everybody defines their version of luxury, right? For some people, luxury is camping in a remote place where silence, that's their perception of luxury, right? And even though they can afford a 5-star hotel, in a penthouse suite in New York or something like that, their definition of luxury is that. And for others, maybe luxury is a spa and a massage and 5-star dining. And so we know that everybody's definition of luxury is different. And what we try to do with our programs is present these various forms of luxury depending on the kind of traveler that you are. So as you said, Lydia, we offer stays in these Mongolian style tent yurts that are in the middle of a beech tree forest in Torres Pine National Park. You actually hear the wind at night, slapping against the tent. And it's a very real experience, right? Sometimes it can get a little difficult maybe to sleep with the wind. We have earplugs for people who have, are sensitive to that kind of stuff. And maybe if that's not your thing, there are also these luxury retreats at the edge of lakes, overlooking the Torres Pine Massif. They have amazing spas. They offer amazing food. The accommodations are fantastic. And so whatever your definition of luxury is, we can tailor that for you. And so in Patagonia, we're really a tailor-made DMC that, as we explained, is a destination management company, which means we've tested all the excursions, all the hotels, all the service providers, and we've combined them, with the expertise that we have from being in the industry 37 years to create these one-of-a-kind experiences that leave people absolutely, breathtaking by just everything they see and they do. And I do want to, clarify something that in the past, there was always a misconception that Patagonia is a destination for people willing to rough it, right? You have to be an adventurer. You have to be willing to camp. You have to have, be in really good physical shape to be able to do these amazing hikes. And that could not be farther from the truth today. Today, Patagonia is really for everybody. We've had guests as young as 2 years old and as old as 98, and they've enjoyed it equally. The glacier behind me, for example, Perito Moreno, is even, it's accessible via these boardwalks. This is on the Argentine side, and there's even an elevator for handicapped people. So if, you're in a wheelchair and you thought Patagonia was, not for you, unaccessible. That's not true. The hotels we work with have ramps, getting in the vehicle and touring around the vehicle. Yes, some excursions will not be an option, but in general, you'll be able to do most of the things to at least be able to see the highlights of these national parks. So that's really unique.
I love that detail. I want our listeners who are even dreaming of the trip of their lifetimes to choose something like this, to understand, they can bring their brother or sister or whoever, that might have that situation. That's so great that you added that detail. Let's talk about so Patagonia. Can you give a little bit of background about Patagonia for people who don't know, what it is? I mean, I like the fact that it's in Argentina and in Chile. And then I asked you earlier before we started, I was like, what side are y'all on? And then you explained. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So Patagonia is immense. It's actually almost the bottom third of the entire continent,
of South America.
Yeah. So it's huge. It begins on the Chilean side at around Puerto Montt, and on the Argentine side around Bariloche, that maybe some listeners have heard of. That is northern Patagonia. And northern Patagonia is separated from southern Patagonia, which is where we operate, by the southern ice field. The southern ice field is the third largest concentration of fresh water in the world after Antarctica and Greenland. And it really divides Chile into two. You cannot travel to Chile from north to south on a road because the ice field actually divides the country in two. And so you have to cross to Argentina or take a ferry, that then circles around the ice field. And so that divides northern Patagonia from the south, and we're actually in the south.
Okay.
The southern part of Patagonia is probably the most popular, and most of you may have heard of, Torres del Paine National Park, Tierra del Fuego, and in Argentina, you have Los Glaciares National Park that includes the famous Perito Moreno Glacier, which is the glacier in the picture behind me. And you have El Chaltén, which is kind of like the adventure capital of Argentina. And it's the equivalent of Torres del Paine, where you just have these amazing hikes, this incredible formation, granite formation, which is Mount Fitzroy and Cerro Torre. And you can do all sorts of hikes. So what we do at Quasar is, because of that first trip that I took with my brother, and we drove, I think it was like 3,000 miles in like 6 days.
In a sedan?
Yeah, in a sedan. But we saw all these places, and if you are going to take, a flight all the way down to Patagonia, and for people that may be wondering, well, how long is that? Consider that a flight from Miami to Santiago de Chile, which is kind of like the main international airport in Chile, is about 9 hours. And the same thing to Buenos Aires in Argentina, the capital of Argentina. Then you have to take another flight down to Patagonia that is another 3 hours. All right.
Once you get to Patagonia, wait, I have a question before you. Is that like a little tiny small plane, or is this like commercial airlines?
No, these are commercial airlines. LATAM, you have a Sky Airline here. They operate. Okay. These are the Airbus A319s and A320s. So the same. We talked about this like in the Galapagos discussion.
Well, it's the same I'm interested. I don't want to get in one of those little tiny, airplanes.
Oh, no.
Other people might be worried about going over a mountain. I just imagine going over a glacier in a little tiny airplane.
No, not at all. And these are, multiple flights per day. There's a lot, these regions are big. So there's actually a lot of non-tourism transportation happening. There are a lot of businesses settled in Patagonia too, whether it's cattle farming or renewable energy or gas and coal and things like that. Okay. So the region is varied in what it does. However, tourism is still the most important industry right now for Patagonia. It used to be cattle farming in the past, but today it is tourism.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Let's go back to what you were trying to tell us. So you fly over there from?
Yep. So I'm just giving an example from Miami, right? There are flights directly from Europe to, like if you're flying from Madrid straight to Santiago de Chile or to Buenos Aires. And then, as we said, we are a Chilean company and we're based on the Chilean side, but we do both sides of Patagonia. So what I always encourage people, and this is something that most people who travel to Patagonia do not understand, is that if you're going to make it all the way down, you have to see both sides. And you couldn't imagine how different they are from one another. So, the Andes mountain range acts as a curtain dividing Chile from Argentina. And what happens is that all the moisture from the Pacific gets trapped on the Chilean side. So it's a lot greener, more forest, more rivers, and things like that. But then on the Argentine side, all that moisture that is captured, most of the glaciers actually snake down to the Argentine side. That's why they call it Los Glaciares National Park, Glaciers National Park. And you have these amazing glaciers, like the one behind me, all over Argentina, that is a lot flatter, but full of these impressive glaciers and these huge, huge lakes that are a result of, the melting of these multiple glaciers that end up in these lakes. And so it's so incredibly different to see Chile and Argentina that if you make it all the way down, you have to leave enough time, right? So not leaving enough time to visit Patagonia and just taking maybe, 4-night tour of Chile's towards the Pine National Park is definitely not enough. Our
So
shortest
let's
program.
talk about what's the right amount of time to.
Yep. So we do realize that for certain people or markets, a week-long vacation is all they can take at a given time, right? So our shortest program is 6 nights, 7 days. All right, we call that Patagonia Express, and we spent 4 of those nights on the Chilean side and 2 of those nights in Argentina. So this is kind of like for people who are short on time, or just have a week to spend. This is the minimum you need to see the best of both national parks. Our most popular program is 8 nights, 9 days, and there we actually spend 5 days on the Chilean side and then 4 on the Argentine side, and so you get to see a lot more in a lot more depth the different parts of Argentina, especially, and then the what I consider to be the best program. This is actually what my brother and I did, way back in 2013, the first time we toured, is we saw everything in Chile and everything in Argentina. So we did, Puerto Natales and Torres del Paine National Park in Chile, and then we went over to El Calafate and Perito Moreno Glacier, and then all the way up to El Chalten. That's our immersion safari. That is 10 nights, 11 days. For those time privileged and budget privileged listeners, that is the itinerary you want to take. And if you have the option, unless, as I mentioned, you're a photographer and the guide can present, sort of maybe an obstacle for what you're trying to achieve from your trip, taking one of these guided safaris with us is literally, the best decision you can make. These guides that work with Quasar are not only fun, entertaining, professional, but they know Patagonia like the back of their hand. It's their home, so they're going to show you spots, for whether it's for photos, take you to hikes, to hidden places. They're going to be able to find the Wemul deer or spot pumas and things like that you're normally wouldn't see on your own. And now that I talk about pumas, I also forgot the one program that we do that only sticks to the Chilean side is our Puma tracking and photo safari tour. That one only is offered in the Chilean side just because pumas mainly congregate on the Chilean side. They're well protected there. Not so much on the Argentine side, where they're still hunted today by cattle farmers because they eat their sheep mainly. But on the Chilean side, they're very well protected. And in our Puma tracking safaris, we have a 95% success rate of seeing these wild cats, sometimes in the hunt, and you can check out videos on our website, but that's generally how our programs work. And as I said, each night you spend on these wonderful lodges on both sides. You get to sip on fine Chilean wines on the Chilean side and fine Argentine wines, and then you can decide which is better, because that's always an issue of discussion between the two countries. Yeah, and like you and I discussed, Lydia, crossing from Chile to Argentina might sound like, you're crossing by land on a Jeep vehicle.
I'm wondering how you get into another country, if you're doing your own excursion too.
Exactly. So Quasar takes care of all this for you. We give you the forms pre-filled. We let you know exactly how it goes. These borders, remember that there are literally hundreds and hundreds of tourists crossing every single day.
Okay.
So even if you just show up with a binder full of papers, they'll take them from you. They'll take the papers that they need. Exactly. Just pick it up and get you on your way. So it's super easy. The windows, on the immigration control points are very well labeled. They tell you which form you have to present, and it's a relatively easy process to cross from one country to another. So you don't have to be afraid about that part, even if you don't speak Spanish, for example. At least on the Chilean side, there is somebody there who speaks English. But on the Argentine side, where they often do not speak English, again, they know exactly which forms you need. And so again, with these binders that we give you all the documents, plus your passports, they'll just get the documents that they need, and you sign off and you're on your way.
If you have a cell phone, you can get Google Translate and you can travel the world. So
Exactly.
any questions you have, it's so cool because you can even like, I don't know why you're not accepting me into your country. And then it'll say it in that language to the other person. So it's
That's a
such
great
an
tip.
amazing, there's almost no barriers these days for anything.
Yeah. And of course, they depend on tourism, right? These regions. So they're very friendly with tourists. Most like restaurants and hotels, if you want to stop at a place, they will speak English, and it's really, really easy. And as you know, maybe fuel is a concern for somebody in a Jeep vehicle, especially if you do the self-drive. It's clearly marked in your itinerary exactly where you need to refuel. And as I mentioned to you too, when we were speaking earlier, um, in Torres del Paine National Park, for example, there isn't a gas station nearby, but are the person who actually is taking care of you while you're there. If you're on a self drive, for example, they'll give you a call, at the morning of the hotel and just say, the refueling operation for your Jeep is happening tonight. Just leave the keys at reception. And while you're sleeping, somebody from our team will go, we'll check your tire pressure, we'll change the tire if, any of them are losing air or something like that. You'll get refueled, and the next morning, your vehicle is ready to go. So we take care of all these things for you. And that is part of the advantage and the peace of mind that people have when they book an overland safari with Quasar versus, for example, just renting a car and going on your own. I can't tell you how many times, Lydia, we've actually encountered people stuck in the middle of nowhere with no
With no
fuel.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe two flat tires, so they can't change anymore, and no way to actually communicate. We actually provide satellite phones in all our vehicles for people to use because there is no cell phone coverage in most of these places. So you always have access to the Quasar team 24/7.
Talk about buying peace of mind, right? I feel like when I've talked to you about the Galapagos, and then of course this one too, I just feel like, maybe someone who doesn't every day live a luxury lifestyle would want to know that your package, it might be a little bit above their normal spend, but these are like trips of a lifetime. And I feel like the vetting that y'all do is a way for everyone to know that their money and their purchase is buying safety, peace of mind, experience, 90% chance you're going to see a puma. I mean, just the fact that we did in our other episode, remember how we talked about working with the locals and working in Quasar is really big about sustainability. We can touch on that right now because somebody who might not have watched the Galapagos doesn't understand how y'all are responsible to the planet, even though you're enjoying what the planet has to offer. What was your saying? You take photos and leave only footprints. Is that what you told me?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that because I want people to realize that, yes, your tour might be what they could consider, the excursion could be considered like, that's a little bit more outside of my price range, but we're describing why it might be, and two, what you're going to get for that. And it might just be the one trip of a lifetime that you're willing to take that extra luxury. I do want to say one thing before you get started. My girlfriend listened to the Galapagos with you while she was at her pool. And she goes, I want to go number one now. And I'm only going to do it that way through the excursion that you described, because it's like, why would you go any other way? It's just an amazing, opportunity to work with such quality detail, right? Y'all are so into the customized detail for every traveler. It's not the tour's not detailed. It's the traveler's needs are detailed with Quasar, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, just going back to your point about these once in a lifetime trips, we've all been on these adventures that for some reason or another did not live up to our expectations, right? Maybe we were trying to save a little money here and we went with our second option because the first just seemed, maybe too pricey. But there are so many different elements that you have to consider that Quasar has considered, in packaging and creating these wonderful all-inclusive adventures, for our guests. One thing that people don't think about is, for example, insurance. The fact that should anything happen to you while hiking, atop this beautiful glacier, which you can do, you can ice hike there, and we take you there. Um, Emergency air evacuation is included as part of your trip, and insurance for whatever, for getting medical attention there, for damage to the vehicle, it's all included. All right, and we only work with professional service providers that have very strong attention to
Standards. Yeah.
exactly safety standards. And so these are, we're never putting you in harm's way in these things, and that's often maybe a risk people take and they don't realize. So that's one thing. And then of course the other component is giving back to these wonderful places, because we do realize, and we always have as a company, that even though nature and the world has gifted us with these wonderful places, we can't just take from them. We have to give back. And so in Patagonia, for example, in 2011, there was a huge fire that burned down, I think it was around 80,000 acres of Torres del Paine National Park. It was started by a tourist, and reforestation then became a big necessity. These native tree forests had all burned down. And so since 2014, Quasar has been supporting Reforest Patagonia, and every guest who travels with Quasar plants their own tree. And so this tree not only helps to restore these native forests that burned down, but it also offsets, the carbon dioxide that your stay in the park produces. All right, so I believe it's in 4 years' time, it will have set all the emissions of the hotels and the excursions that you took. And the emissions that are released by the Jeep vehicles that we provide, we actually work with the carbon fund to offset those, and that's included as part of your trip. So our adventures in Patagonia are completely carbon neutral. And as I mentioned too, it's not just about nature, the same as with Galapagos. People only think that by supporting wildlife protection and endangered species and introduced species, those kinds of programs, they're really helping the Galapagos. But it's also about the people that live there, and this certainly is exactly the same way in Patagonia. There are important problems in Patagonia that need to be addressed. There's a lot of fishing happening there for king crab, for example, from unexperienced fishermen that have never taken a PADI instruction course, right? And so they're risking their lives unknowingly every day, and many of them die each year due to decompression sickness or accidents and things like that. And so Quasar helps to be able to get these people the training that they need and perform their economic activities in a safe way. We also help with a school that teaches English, realizing that we probably want these kids, maybe the kids of the fishermen, to maybe not fish, that generation maybe focuses on tourism, but knowing that about 70% of the tourists that come to Patagonia are English speaking, or that's the main language that they use to get around, that you need to speak
More
relatively good English.
for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of help while always maintaining, as much as we can, the traditions of the place. The Patagonia has a very rich heritage of the ranches that have been there for centuries. And taking people to hike a place like the base of the towers that's behind you is of course a main attraction, but also going and seeing what a sheep shearing demonstration is in one of these estancias, watching the border collies literally jump on top of the sheep is an incredible experience. And these animals are so smart, Lydia, you can't imagine. Through one tone of a whistle, they know to separate one sheep from the group. Through another tone, they know to group them together. Another tone of the whistle just makes them, sit still and be ready for the next command. And these animals are just,
fascinating.
It's fascinating. And so getting to know the locals, having mate with that local gaucho, that's the term for the local cowboys in Patagonia, drinking the mate tea with them and sharing stories is something that we always take that opportunity for guests actually to enjoy, aside from the obviously the iconic and must-dos of the destination, like hiking the base of the towers or going to see Perito Moreno Glacier. So there's a real balance in how we put together our adventures.
Yeah. I learned a new term, and maybe that's just because I'm new to the travel industry, from a marketing perspective. And I was curious, have you ever heard it? Somebody said, like impact travel. Have you heard that term? And it reminded me of you and our conversation, because you have to be conscious of the impact that you're making when you go travel. So in your case with the Galapagos or Patagonia, the impact you make is positive, right? You're giving back. And so I
Yeah.
really thought that was an interesting term that I had never heard before, but it makes a lot of sense when because you and I were talking the other day, and I asked you, well, what are some of the questions when someone's calling around asking for advice and tour information, and they're talking to a tour guide or an excursion guide or a planning management company? Remember, I was like saying, well, what are some of the questions they need to ask of the people to know that it matches with their their belief system? And so you went through some of the questions that way, and I thought people need to be concerned when they're deciding where they're going to go and what they're going to do and who they're going to do it with. They need to think about, what is the impact that I'm going to contribute, especially like my carbon footprint or, the waste aspect, the whole sustainability conversation. And y'all really take care of that and hold it as a priority. And that's one of the reasons that I love highlighting Quasar.
And ultimately, Lydia, in that respect, even though, of course, as the companies operating the region, we're responsible for leading these sustainable, eco-friendly, low-impact operations, ultimately, the power lies in the person who's acquiring the product. And so the responsibility that lies on all travelers to actually take the time and research what the company that you're traveling with is doing to help the destination, to help the environment, to offset the emissions from your trip is super important. And at least I travel this way now, and I love seeing that my dollars go a longer way with certain companies, and those are the companies that I choose. And generally, they tend to have the best experience anyways, because they're focused on the overall well-being and this impact travel. That I hadn't heard of the term exactly like that, but I know exactly what it is, and Quasar definitely does that, where we try to keep impact to a minimum through doing all these things that are part of one of these grand expeditions in Patagonia.
Yeah. I am so thrilled to have been able to share with our audience and future listeners about Patagonia. I hope we've inspired in this conversation everyone to consider Patagonia on their bucket list as a must do. And I hope that they make really good decisions about the companies that they work with. And we know that based on our conversation, that Quasar Expeditions is a company that's doing it right. So
Exactly.
do you have anything you want to share before we say goodbye and thank our listeners for sticking with us?
Just, I would say, do your research, plan ahead, take a look at, there are common like pitfalls or mistakes that many travelers make when visiting Patagonia. Make sure you don't do those, right? Like knowing when to visit, what the minimum amount of time you need to spend it in place, how to choose the excursions, which companies and things like that. You can find a lot of that information on Quasar's website. It's quasarex.com. And once you get those boxes checked off, whether it's with Quasar or not, just make sure that, you tick all those boxes, you get all those questions answered, and you'll be better prepared than 90% of the travelers going to the destination to have a truly amazing time. These are one-of-a-kind destinations. It's not cheap to get there, even if you're traveling, for example, as a backpacker. Between flights and transportation and the lodging that is scarce, so the prices are cheap at any level, or aren't cheap at any level. So just make sure you get the most out of your time there and you get the best experience in Patagonia possible.
I love that. Thank you so much, Fernando, for spending another day here talking about how Quasar Expeditions really cares and customize the excursions for the traveler. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming, and I hope to see you online.
Thank you, Lydia.
Talk to you later.
Take care. Thanks
Bye.
for having me. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the show today. And if you'd like to be a guest on the Global Travel Junkie podcast and YouTube channel, reach out to us at our Contact Us form at globaltraveljunkie.com. We hope to see you out traveling. Adios. Ciao. Au revoir.